So what did you miss at Jubilee today? Well, you missed a very special day. You missed a day where Reverend Evan Smith and Jess Swance-Smith led us in worship. And led us in worship with smudging and drumming and beautiful prayers, and invited us to consider our common ground with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, for us to consider our legacy as parties to treaties, our responsibility and the truth of being settlers and colonialists. They invited us to consider the relationship that we have with the people who lived in this land long before we arrived, and how we arrived, and how we forged our relationships. We engaged with some scripture, Paul's letter to the church in Rome and Matthew's gospel on forgiveness, and also a line from Paul where he talks about those that eat meat and the weaker ones who will not eat meat, and a desire to bring these communities together to recognize them. But Evan picked up very quickly on the fact that Paul still refers to those people as weak, as if their faith is not as strong, as valid, as good. If they would only eat the way they did, then they'd be fine. But it's okay that they're not as good as we are. We need to accept them and bring them into community. And as charitable as that may have sounded in Paul's ears, as well-meaning as some people might have been when they first embraced those words, the reality is that when we look at anybody else's faith as weak or less than ours, or another person's culture, or simply way of being, when we imagine ourselves as superior and that it's going to be okay for us to just bring them in, well, and horrific things happen. Genocide happens. Cultural assassination happens. We look at another community's culture, and we say, well, it's not as good as ours, so let's remove it, and then they can have ours and they'll be better off. And in fact, that is a history of our relationship with Indigenous peoples in Canada. And so she invited us to think about that, to think hard. And she talked a little bit about our historical relationship with the people of Turtle Island and the people who would come to forge a country that they called Canada, and to really look at the attitudes, the actions that have shaped not only our country but our relationships. She talked about the apology, in which the United Church of Canada apologized for our role in residential schools and our role in a cultural genocide, and how the apology for residential schools was acknowledged but not accepted. And she talked about how now, many years later, some of the elders have begun to wonder whether it's time to accept the apology. And yet, at the last examination only months ago, not yet. But she recognized and shared with us the hope that we're still acknowledging. And the answer is not no, the answer is not yet. So the invitation is there for us to be patient, and to persist, and to be loving, and to be worthy partners in reconciliation. It was a challenging service, and it didn't have a Disney ending, it had an honest ending. The story is not yet told. We are in the midst. But forgiveness, reconciliation are possible. They're not off the table. We need to persist, and we need to be patient. And we need to recognize our common ground and not look at one another as weaker than or lesser than, but with mutual respect and love, forge a way to live together. And in the midst of all of that, we prayed together and we sang together and we were community together. And for my part, I mostly opened my heart and sat in amazement and took it all in. The drumming, the words, the music, and the whole community trying to find common ground, working to find where love connects us and where other things need to be set aside so that love can grow. That's what you missed at Jubilee today. But you have time to think about what it means to be forgivable, forgiving, what it means to live with respect and not live a life shaped by judgment of others, or even judgment upon ourselves. It was a really remarkable day today, and I wish you could have been with us, but I hope you'll be with us soon. And until we get to see you at Jubilee, God bless.